Ever since I made a video about the TC1100 Windows XP tablet, I've received every kind of feedback imaginable. Some people talked about their own experiences with that tablet, one guy talked about his being But probably the most common response was along the lines of, "Does it run Windows 10? And so I thought it was only fair to test some of your wonderful suggestions. And so now, without further ado, it's time to play YouTube's favorite game show, Will It Run on the XP Tablet? That's right, today I'm going to share the results of my totally scientific experiment to see what OSs and programs will run on the TC1100. Now for those who don't remember, or just haven't seen the first video I did on the TC1100, the tablet doesn't have a CD drive, so I used a bootable USB for nearly all the installations. I decided to lay the tablet flat to give everyone a better view of the stylus, and instead of using the included keyboard, I used this wireless one. Also, even though I currently have an SSD installed on the tablet, for testing I'm using the original 20GB hard drive that came with the thing. I've divided the operating systems into three main categories: versions of Windows before XP, versions of Windows after XP, and other. To start, I figured it'd be best to go back to some of the earliest versions of Windows. Interesting fact, up until XP, Windows was actually DOS-based, which meant that for each version I installed in this category, I had to install DOS onto the tablet first. There are two ways to do this: the traditional way through floppy disks, or the easy way, by installing DOS onto a virtual machine and imaging it over to the tablet's hard drive. I did each way once, though I will say the virtual machine method was a lot quicker and easier for anyone planning on recreating this experiment at home. Now granted, I'm not covering every version of Windows since many versions look pretty similar to each other, but you'll at least get to see how well Windows 3.1 and 95 work on this tablet. First up, Windows 3.1. Since it needed 6 floppies to install, I decided to run the install in VirtualBox and then image the hard drive over to the bootable USB flash drive. After installing a driver so that 3.1 could make use of the ultra-high resolution 1024x768 display, things look pretty good. Pretty much all of the programs work as you would expect, though unfortunately there's no support for the touchscreen. I was hoping that, since the boot screen does have pen support, the BIOS would be able to emulate a PS2 mouse, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I'm aware that there's also a version of Windows 3.1 specifically designed for pen computing, but I was unable to track down a usable copy to test. It didn't seem to take advantage of any of the tablet's special hardware, but speed-wise, Windows 3.1 ran pretty well. Next up is Windows 95. Installation was a bit easier since I was able to copy the install files right onto the tablet's hard drive, however I still ran into a bit of an error. See, Windows 95 by default is unable to make use of my tablet's 2 whole gigabytes of RAM, but after changing a quick setting everything ran smoothly again. Windows 95 in operation was very similar to Windows 3.1. It didn't have 1024x768 support out of the box and it didn't recognize touchscreen input. I did try to locate Wacom drivers for Windows 95, but unfortunately they didn't support my tablet's touchscreen. I can't say I'm very surprised though, considering the tablet itself was released about 10 years after Windows 95 was. A fairly common request was to try Linux on the tablet. I'm pretty sure no matter what distro I choose, I'm going to get plenty of people telling me what I should have tried instead, so what the heck, I'll just try Ubuntu. I loaded it onto the flash drive and booted right into it. Surprisingly, the latest version of Ubuntu, for x86 anyways, still supports this tablet and does a great job of making use of its more unique hardware. Granted, it runs like crap, which isn't the software's fault as much as it is the hardware's, but out of the box it was able to support the stylus, the native display resolution, the battery, and though I didn't catch it on video, the tablet's audio. As long as you're patient and don't mind single-digit frame rates, Ubuntu is actually pretty easy to get working on this tablet. I was actually really interested upon seeing a request to try Android x86. To be completely honest, I had never heard of an x86 port of Android until now, but it seemed like the perfect match. A touch-centric OS for an x86 tablet PC. Too bad I couldn't get it to work. I read it to a flash drive, I popped it in, I ran through the install menus, and I got nothing. Just this black screen. I could troubleshoot it, I suppose, but frankly, it's a Unix system. I don't know this. From what I could find, nobody else has been successful at getting Android x86 to run on the TC1100, but I did manage to find one guy who installed WebOS, and from what I can see, it doesn't look half bad. Alright, here we are, the moment you've all been waiting for, the modern versions of Windows. Which version is the latest that the tablet will run? Place your bets now. The installs from this point on were mostly the same. Copy a few files over from the original install disk, perform a little command prompt wizardry, pop it into the tablet, and let the software do the rest. At the same time, these installs were probably the longest. I didn't keep track of time for them, but they were definitely longer than all the previous OSs tested. First up is Vista. The installer didn't recognize the stylus, but other than that, things ran fairly smoothly. Vista was the first version of Windows to support tablet PC natively instead of in a separate release like had been seen with XP, And right away after booting up for the first time, Vista already supported the stylus, had a few fancy graphical effects for it, and offered handwriting input options. I had to manually set the screen resolution, but fortunately this time no additional driver was needed. The arrow theme in Vista was notorious around the time of its release for being hard to run on underpowered hardware, and my tablet is no exception. Some games have simplified graphics, and others run just plain horribly. Vista itself rated my computer a 1.0 out of 5 just because of the lackluster graphics card. Windows 7 was a lot like Vista. Same installers, same arrows, same 1.0. There were a few more toys to play with in 7, like the math input panel, but other than that, it really didn't offer much more than Vista had. Something I didn't mention that was added to Vista but still exists in 7 though is gesture support for the handwriting input panel. Now, words can be crossed out, split up, and corrected much more quickly. I didn't notice much of an improvement in handwriting accuracy from XP, but that was mostly because XP's handwriting recognition was already pretty good. The installation for Windows 8.1 took quite some time. The splash screen alone took about 10 minutes before the installer even started, but during the installation I noticed a few things. For one, there was finally support for the stylus, and it also ran in the tablet's native resolution. I expected that Windows 8.1 would be a pretty good fit for this tablet. It was recent, the Metro UI was designed to not be graphically taxing, and the one feature almost everybody hated, the redesigned start menu, was created with a tablet in mind. The first two turned out more or less true. I was able to get acceptable frame rates without sacrificing visual quality, and Windows 8 is still widely supported by Microsoft. The start menu though, well, let's just say it was lackluster to say the least. Even though it was optimized for touch, it still felt rather restrictive, even more so using the stylus rather than just a mouse. This is probably because I'm using a pen-based touchscreen and it was designed for a finger-based touchscreen, but still, it just doesn't work for me. At the very least, running Windows 8.1 on a tablet, I now finally see the appeal of having a full-screen calculator app. And finally, this brings us to Windows 10, the most recent version of Windows. This tablet is just barely within the system requirements of the OS, so will it run? The short answer is, I don't know. You see, just like how the Windows 8 installer took about 10 minutes on the splash screen before starting, I gave the Windows 10 installer some time. Nothing happened. No matter, maybe it just needs to be a bit longer. Half an hour. Still nothing. I waited a bit longer, but it was becoming apparent that the installer was probably just frozen, and so I gave up. I heard all sorts of stories about this installation. Some people say it's impossible because of a limitation of the tablet's processor, some say it's because of a driver issue, and at least one commenter claims to have already successfully done it on 2 tablets. I really don't know if or how I can get Windows 10 onto this tablet, but I'm fairly certain that if I did, it wouldn't be much of a departure from Windows 8. Still, that's around 2 decades of compatibility with future and past operating systems. Not bad for a little tablet designed to run Windows XP. I don't really plan on keeping any of the upgraded versions of Windows on the tablet since none of them added enough new features to be worth their more sluggish performance, but it was still nice to be able to run through all of them and really test the limits of what the TC1100 could do. I never thought I'd see the day where a modern operating system would run on such old hardware, but if anything, I've just made it an even more useful 14-year-old tablet. More or less.